tonight we're finishing off our last week of Lost and Found. So this has been 5 weeks. Amen. So we've been doing this series for 5 weeks now, and last week I tried my best to do probably the most verses I've ever done in my life preaching. It was like 20-something verses when I was used to doing like 4 to 8 verses. Well, 4 verses. So we didn't get through it all, but we're going to finish that tonight, and we're going to end this series. And then next week, we're going to start a new series on the power of our testimony and the power of the stories that are in this room, that the things that God has done for you in your life, they're the most important story that you have next to how you encountered and met with God, because no one can disqualify that from you. It's your story. It's what God did in your heart. And so we're going to have a few weeks, these next few weeks, we're just going to be hearing about the stories of what God has done in your hearts and in your lives. And we're going to have different people sharing different bits of their testimonies as well. So it's going to be fun. It's not just going to be me up here. I'm going to probably spend 5 minutes at the beginning, and then we're going to get 2 to 3 people each week sharing their testimonies. So it's going to be an amazing time. And it's going to be great if you have always wanted to talk to your friends about God, but you've just had that feeling of, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to say it. This would just be great encouragement just for you, just to know how to convey your faith and share your faith, and really know how to share what God's done in your life in a way that you can release that into someone else's life who doesn't know God, and they can still be blessed. All right? Okay, so we're going to start. But first, tonight, I need you to feel free to talk back to me, not to each other, because that's just rude, but to respond back to me, okay? So if eyes are just looking at me, it's weird. So if I say something you like, you're free to say back. If I say something you don't like, you can come and talk to me afterwards. But if I ask for feedback, please give me feedback. So let's have an example. How are we all tonight? Okay, good. All right. It is true. The more feedback I get, the quicker I am. And then the quicker we can go. Last week, I went to Nando's with a bunch of you guys. And Ben Nolman, cheekily, halfway through his meal, sat opposite me because he knew that I could never finish my meal. So he was there waiting for me to finish my half chicken and chips. And as soon as I was done, I was like, Ben, you can have it. And he said, no, I won't have it. But then was talking about going to McDonald's afterwards because he was still hungry, and then he ended up eating it. So if you ever go out to dinner with me, or I'm there, and you like to eat, sit near me, because I rarely finish my plate. Whereas my wife, Rebecca, she might not look it, but that girl can eat. She can eat me under the table. It's literally her family gene. They're all really tall and really skinny, and they eat more food than I've ever seen anyone eat in my life, just the whole family. My mother-in-law can eat more than me, and she's 65. Now, I don't have a really small appetite, but they're Campbell's. That's what I blame. They're just really tall, and their metabolism just goes fast. All right, so we're going to be looking at the last bit of the parable of the lost son. This is about the older son, the son who didn't get lost but stayed at home. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go into that. I'm going to read it out, and then we're just going to finish off, and then we're going to be done. Does that sound good? Yeah. All right, so Luke 15, if you want to turn in your Bibles, if you have them, or if you have it on your phone, you can download the Bible app, and you can download thousands of different versions of the Bible. Turn to Luke 15, and we're going to be starting in verse 25. It says this, "Meanwhile, the older son was in the field, and when he came near to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him, 'What's going on?' 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' Then the older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, and he comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him?' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again, and he was lost and is found. Father, I thank you so much for what you're doing in our hearts right now. And Father, right now I just ask that you just use my words tonight to just speak to people's hearts. And Father, I ask that you just turn our hearts to be able to hear your voice, to hear what you want us to do and you want us to be in the relationship you has for us. And so we just say thank you so much for what you're going to do tonight. Thank you so much for what you've already done. And we ask that you'd be with us in this time in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we have the last bit of the story. Now, the first bit of the story was a son who says to his dad, Dad, you're an all right guy, but I think I can do life better without you than with you. So I wish you were basically dead. So can you sell a third of all of your goods, and can you give me cash, because I prefer cash, and I'm going to go and I'm going to do my own life my own way, the way I want to, because I think I can do life without you. I think the way that you've been telling me how to live my life isn't the best way, and I think, you know what, I want to go and try to do this on my own. And so the father says, okay, and he gives his son a third of his wealth. And the son goes away and squanders it all, blows it all in a relatively short amount of time. And he runs out of money. Then not only does he run out of money, this is what's even worse. As soon as he runs out of money, there's a famine in the land, which means that food, the thing that we all need to live, that becomes more expensive. And so when you have zero money and the cost of food raises, that's not a good sign for you. That means you're not going to eat. And so what he does is he hires himself out as someone who would feed the pigs. And he would look at the pig's food, which was actually inedible to humans, but he'd look at it and he'd want it and desire it because he was just like, I will literally eat anything. I mean, I kind of know what that feels like, not in that sense, but like as a young boy growing up. I used to play quite a lot of sport, and I would come home and I would be starving. And I would look in the fridge, and there was nothing instant to eat. So I'd shout to my mom, Mom, there's no food. We need food. And she's like, dinner will be in an hour. I'm like, I cannot wait an hour. I'm going to die. Because I literally felt like I was going to die because I had just done like 4 hours of like American football practice and walked home. And then I was just like, I can eat a horse if you gave it to me. And my mom would be like, the fridge is full of food. I'm like, yeah, but there's nothing good to eat. And I'd look at it, and she's like, have an egg. I'm like, but I have to make an egg. And she'd literally show me all the different foods there were to eat. And then she'd be like, so what do you want? I was like, I want you to make me something. And she's like, oh, I see. So there is food, but you just want me to do it. I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, that's not going to happen. And I was like, oh. And then I would inevitably have like a piece of white bread on its own. I'd cut the crust off because I was that type of kid. And I'd just have white bread, and I'd like sit there like pretending that this is the first food I'd eaten in like years. And I'd look at my mom and be like, I'm so starving. And then dinner would come along, and I couldn't finish my dinner. As per my usual stomach, that my eyes always think bigger. I think I'm not sure if it's a guy thing. I think it's just a hungry person thing. Yeah. Some people finish all the food, but when I think of like my perfect meal, it's massive in my mind. There's steak, and there's lobster as well, surf and turf. Oh, and there's shrimp on top of it, and then there's like macaroni and cheese on the side, and there's a bunch of extra stuff. But then like I take 3 bites of everything, and I'm like feel like I'm gonna die. So I think the hunger that the younger son felt was probably a bit more serious than my hunger needs, but I still relate to him. And so he decides after thinking in his lowest of lows, feeling like he's going to starve, that the best thing that he could do is actually go back to his father's house. And he could say, Father, I've sinned against you and I've sinned against God, and what I want to be one of your servants, because even your servants have more than enough food. And so he does this, and the father sees him, and then the father runs towards him in the distance and immediately restores the honor of being a son. That the first act that the father did was restore the son back to his rightful place and position in the family, to be a son. He didn't have to earn it. He didn't have to work his way back. That when he repented of his sin before his father, as he was trying to, his father forgave him, and immediately he was restored back to the place of honor. And so now they're going to celebrate because of this. And the older son, who's out in the field right now working, he's hearing all this commotion. It says that he could hear music and dancing. And so I love how it says he could hear music and he could hear dancing. If you can hear people dancing, it's a good party. I love when we have like in Josh's generation, we've done like our summer balls or like summer parties and Christmas balls. Going to the offices, which is just underneath the ballroom, when everyone is dancing. It literally sounds like the floor is going to fall through. But I just know everyone's having fun. And you can physically hear dancing. I can hear the footsteps. And so this older son can hear all this celebration going on. And he says to one of the servants, says, "What's going on?" And the servant says, like, "Your father has killed a fattened calf because your brother is back. His son has come back." And he's filled with anger. And tonight we're going to be looking at the older son, because in this story, the older son, when I look at this story, in my own life, in my own faith, I can relate more with the older son than I can with the son who ran away. I can relate to this more, and I'm going to show you how. That in this moment, the older son, he's feeling anger towards his brother who he's completely forgotten about, who in Jewish tradition would not have to call himself a brother anymore. That by asking in Jewish tradition to be removed from for your inheritance, you were actually, your individual name didn't carry the weight of your family anymore. And so this older brother, who's probably very hurt by this whole thing, that he had a sibling who he grew up with just leave all of a sudden. This son comes back, and he hears about this from a servant, and he hears how the father's celebrating, when all the son can imagine is all the pain and torment and frustration that the younger son has caused, not only himself, but his father and his family and the family name. Because by doing that, like, it would have been a scandal. It would have been this huge thing, because I'm trying to think of the equivalent. It would be like if the queen were to die or to hand on the throne, and it would be like if Prince Charles just said no to the throne and abdicated it and said no. It would be a scandal. It would be huge. Like, why is he doing this? What's going on? Like, it would cause this uproar, and it would cause the stress of the family name to change. Now, thankfully, there's lineages already there, and there's people planned if that happens. But it would still cause this. If it were to happen, like, I'm not sure the type of room we have. How many? I'm just going to ask. Let's be respectful. How many of you support and like the Queen? There we go. Okay. All right. And if you don't, start singing the national anthem. And if you don't, I understand, as someone who's not English, but is from a country where your queen is still my queen, I never understood it, but Canadians have this fascination with the monarchy and royalty. They love it. Yeah. There's something about, like, when William and Kate had their first baby, my mum was calling me up, and she was like, "What's going on? What's going on?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, we're watching it on the news right now." I'm like, "Well, what are you watching?" And she described it. I'm like, "I'm watching the same thing, Mum." And she's like, "Yeah, but you're in England, so you get the news quicker." I'm like, "No, that's not how it works." And then she'd, like, read me the gossip magazines about, like, what, like, they're not going to name the baby Charles because William doesn't like his dad, and she's like, "Is this true? And she's like, they're all into it. And like my mom was like, okay, this year for Christmas, don't worry about that year when they had Prince George. Thank you. Didn't know that. Or the other one. Her. Hold on. She was like, don't get your family any presents. We don't need to worry about it because we're staying here that year. She's like, but can you send your grandma some like newspapers from like the day they were born? Because that would really make her happy. And I'm like, really? And she's like, no, because it's a big deal. That was a big day when they had Prince George. That meant a lot to the UK. That meant a lot to the world. And in the same way, imagine that a family of stature, a family who has a name, the youngest son decides to say, I do not want to be recognized. I do not want to be attached to that name. Even though it would be like me saying, I don't want to carry the name Long anymore. So even though my name is Chris Long, I don't want to be known for and attached to my family, my mum, my dad, my brother, my sister-in-law, my 2 nephews, my family back in Canada. I don't want to be attached to them anymore. I want to be my own man because I think I can do it on my own. By me saying that causes what that would do to a family, what that would do to the people back at home. There'd be so many questions of why, what's going on, what's led you to this? And so in my mind, I see this older son and I see his response. And his response is angry. Why? Because he's probably confused. He's like, what's going on? Why are we celebrating this guy? Like, we need to have some family conversation first before we celebrate. And so when I read this, I actually can connect with the older son. I can actually be like, no, I get why he's doing this. I get his response. Because if that happened to me, I'd probably, in my heart, I think I would have similar questions of why, what's going on? You've caused my family a lot of pain, and now you want to come back in? Whoa, let's see about this. But immediately the father restores. He forgives and restores the son. And so the older son has some issues now. So the older son is in a position now where he feels angry, he feels upset, and there's nothing worse than when you're trying to have a party and there's one person who's in a mood. And you can just see them standing in the corner like, why are you guys even celebrating? I don't even know. And they grumble, they moan, they whinge, they whine. They can't be happy the fact that you're happy. And it's hard. And so the dad comes out and he addresses the son. And he says, and he tries to get him back in. But this is what the son says, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. And there's something about that line I just want to look at. All these years I've been slaving for you. That this older son, who was the eldest and who would take over the family estate, he would take over from his dad. He would be a very wealthy man as soon as his father died. That there wouldn't be any cause or concern for money or wealth. But he immediately identifies as a slave. In his heart, he just felt like he was working for his father rather than being his father's son. And that we can so turn our faith, our belief in Jesus Christ, into what we do and what we don't do, rather than what it is, a relationship. That we have, thank you, that we have a relationship with God. It's not a bunch of rules and regulations. It's not a list of do's and a list of don'ts. But if you're not easy, we will naturally make it into that because we find that more comfortable than an open relationship between a father and a son. It's easier to say, if you can do X, Y, and Z, you can be a part of us, rather than saying like, no, you can be a part of us because of who you are. And it doesn't matter if you mess up, doesn't matter how you mess up, there's always a way back home. There's always grace, there's always mercy. You're always welcome back. Doesn't matter how far you run, you can come home. That we can so easily turn that into, well, if you don't believe what we believe, if you don't believe what we believe about like style of music or like the fact the lights are off, or you don't believe the way we gather or whatever reason, and you're like, oh, this is like, oh, I don't think I can be a part of this anymore. You've missed the point. The point is about a family coming together. Like God's plan is to redeem and restore every human being because he wants to have the best and the greatest family. That you are sons and daughters, that you are his son, you are his daughter. And he calls you home and he calls you back. And he is waiting for you to come back. And sometimes we can turn our faith into an organized religion with a list of do's and a list of don'ts. And we can make that our focus. And the older brother made it his focus. It says it. I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed you. And so not only is he been slaving, but he's been doing all the things that he thinks his father wants him to do. He's been trying to be someone else. He's been trying to be what he thinks his dad wants him to be rather than being himself. And we can fall into that trap so easily. I can fall into that trap so easily. Like just the journey that I'm on right now with God, me and God is this. Is God saying to me, who are you? And my initial instinct is always to describe what I've done and say, well, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this. And he's like, no, who are you? And I'm like, but you don't understand, God. I've faithfully served. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. And he's like, I don't care. Who are you? And I'm like, well, I don't understand the question. What are you talking about? Like, I've told you who I am. And he's like, no, you've told me what you've done. He's like, but I don't care what you've done. I care who you are. I care about who Chris is. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? And I've been going through this journey just recently, and I love how God brings this stuff up. Because I'm just like, because all God's doing is he's revealing to me my identity. And he's actually showing me that where I'm just like, oh, nailed that preach. I'm so good at preaching, which means I'm so good at being a Christian. He's just like, no, that's not it. It doesn't matter if you suck at it. That's still not the point. He's taking away the list that I have to justify myself. And it's an amazing thing, but it hurts. And it's scary because I hold on to that list for dear life. Because as soon as I feel challenged, like if someone challenges me, I'm like, this is who I am. You see what I've done? I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Like, look at the list. Read it yourself. I think I'm pretty good. And then, like, people are like, wow, that's an amazing list. Still don't like you. And I'm like, what? Why? Because there's something about when we try and justify our actions, when it's in front of someone who's not asking us to justify our actions, I can come across like, Chris, what are you doing? Why are you worrying? Why are you panicking? Why are you trying to justify yourself? All I did was ask you a simple question. This is what God said. He said to me, he's like, Chris, who are you? And I literally, it was on my day that I take just to pray and prep and just study the Bible and to spend time with God. And it was probably like 6 hours into it, I just didn't get it. And I was like, God, you're gonna have to show me. And he's like, okay, do you want to know the answer that I was looking for? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, all I wanted you to say was, I'm your son. And I was like, what? And he's like, all I wanted you to say was, when I say, who are you? Just, I'm your son. That's all he wanted me to say. But to me, that didn't justify my relationship with him because I'd made my faith, and it's so easy to turn my faith into a list of rules rather than a relationship. Which is what we're talking about. It doesn't matter if you ran away from home. It doesn't matter if you've spent everything and you've squandered it all and you feel like every action you've taken up until this moment has been away from God. As soon as you decide to turn towards God, the Father is instantly running towards you. Why? Because it's about relationship. He cares more about you as a person. He loves you. He made you. He created you. And so it's this different story. And so this older brother is a bit confused, and I can relate to the older brother recently, just about what God's been speaking to me about, and just breaking down where I've walked in. I've put myself in slavery. I've put myself in bondage. I've put myself in a place where I feel like I have to perform for God. But what God's been doing is this, he just says to the son, like, but this is your, where is it, what the Father says? My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we have to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again and was lost and is found. What the Father is speaking to in this situation is actually getting rid of self-centered Christianity. Getting rid of church, and we gather, and why we're here is all about me or all about you. And you only like church and you only like your relationship with God if its focus is you. I'm just going to tell you this right now. You can't find that in the Bible in a positive light. When people talk about that type of faith, it's always in a negative context. It's always in the context of someone realizing that they're not getting it, just like the older son. That there's something about who we are as sons and daughters, as children of God, that if we truly understand it, we realize that it's not about our actions, even if we've done everything right. Just as it's equal, even if we've done everything wrong. It's about who we are, and it's learning, and it's a journey of finding our faith in God. It's believing in the impossible. Even when you don't think that you're good enough, God sees through that because he created you, and he knows what you're capable of. He knows the passions and desires that are in your heart. The whole point of coming to church isn't that I put vision into you, and I put passion and purpose into you, because then you're just serving my vision and my purpose and my destiny. And like 10 years from now, you're going to be like, well, that was a waste of time. I'm back at home. Chris isn't anywhere near. All I know how to do is live my relationship with God the way Chris wants me to. That's not church. That's not family. Family is empowering one another to be who you were created to be. That's not about one man's vision, one woman's vision, and everyone else gets in line. It's about us empowering one another to become the men, to become the women that God has created us to be. That's what church is. That's what family is. That's what relationship is. But so often we can turn it into a list of rules, a list of regulations, and it's not God's best. It's not what he wants for us. We have to learn to understand our identity isn't based by what we do. It's based by who we are and who we're created by. And if we're created by God, and I believe every person was, that there's no mistakes, that you're not a mistake, that every person who's ever lived is there for a reason, is there for a purpose, is there for a plan. That you were created by your Heavenly Father for something good. I love the emphasis just at the end here with this father talking to his son outside when everyone else is partying and everyone else is celebrating and everyone else is being glad. He's talking to his son and he's saying, son, all of this is yours. Sometimes we have to have an honest conversation with God, and God has an honest conversation with us, and he's like, listen, all that I have, this is what Jesus says, all that I have is given to me, now go and make disciples. So Jesus says in Matthew 28, all that I have has all things, all authority has been given to me. So Jesus has all authority. And then as soon as he has all authority and all power, and he's fully God again, his first response is, now you guys go and you take this and you use it. That you live with the same passion, with the same purpose as Jesus, the way you're created to live. That we're not all called to be pastors in a church like this. We're not all called to work for a Christian church. We're not all called to all be on the worship team together. We're not all called to sing just for this. That you were created, and actually you were commissioned by God to do something very specific to you. And that's something so specific. It's like God only made you for that because he knew that's what your passion was, because he knew you'd have influence in that area, because he knew it would be your joy and your happiness to go and do that and impact that area. That I really don't like it when people say, like, well, Chris, like, you have a proper job. You work for God. I'm like, no. If you work, you have a job. If you work, you have a proper job. That's the truth. It doesn't matter what you do with your time, as long as you're doing what God has for you and created you to do, and you're walking in line with what He's called you to do, you're fulfilling God's calling in your life. That so many times, like I'll sit with students, I'll sit with young people, and they'll be like, man, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, well, what are you passionate about? What do you like? And they begin to tell me. I'm like, why don't you do that? That sounds amazing. I'm like, how would you feel if you could do that for a living? Oh, it'd be the best thing ever. I'm like, great. I'm like, do you think I could do that? I'm like, you better, because I hear you say that, and I think that I would suck at that. I can't do that, which means that you must be made to do that. So let's get you to do that. Let's figure out how we can get you in line with what God has for you. That there's something about understanding our identity as sons, as daughters, but it doesn't all come to a pinnacle in this room as you have to work for a church, you have to work for God, that God's created us to change the world. And right now, by speaking to just the people in this room, not the people who listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube video, I'm not changing the world this second. I'm just not. But I know that if I'm faithful to what God has for me and I can empower as many people to do what God has for them, that will then change the world. And if those people then empower other people around them to do what God's called them to do, they will then change the world. That's how Jesus did it with 12 people. Like Jesus literally had 12 guys, and we're here because of those 12 guys. It's really simple. And we need to take away all the baggage that religion can put on faith and that people can put on our faith, because we have to understand that we are created to be sons and daughters.